In this clip, we're going to be learning about the blend modes stencil and silhouette. So in a previous module, I alluded to the fact that we'd be covering all of the blend modes except for two of them, and that's what we're going to be discussing in this clip. So these blend modes act very similarly to track mats and to the preserve underlying transparency function we just learned about. But sometimes you're going to need to use a blend mode instead for some different reasons. So the first place that I want to talk about these is in this little icon right here. If I zoom in to see both of the icons for Monday and Wednesday, you can see on the Wednesday icon, the outline around the clouds is cut away so that we can actually see to the back. So there's a transparency there. Now, here we just have this white line. So I want to figure out how I can make that white line transparent so that it matches this icon. This icon is called Overcast. So I'll come down here to where I see Overcast in my timeline and double click to open it. Now, just to give you a quick rundown of what we've got in this comp, I have my two gray clouds right there. I can turn those on and off to show you. And then I've got my white backgrounds that create those outlines. And then we've got the sun. So these white outlines are what I need to change the blending mode for. So I'm going to shift select both of those. And you can see that we've got these four blend modes: stencil alpha, stencil luma, silhouette alpha, and silhouette luma. So the way these are going to work is going to be similar to those track mats in that luma is going to use the luminance and alpha is going to actually look at if there is an alpha channel as part of that layer. So in my case, there might be some overlap because we have a white cloud, and that's really going to have the same effect as its own alpha channel because it is a shape that's just been drawn. So let's see what happens if we just click stencil alpha. That's really not the one we want because that acts as cutting away everything that was beneath that. So we're actually going to be using silhouette in this case. So silhouette alpha is going to give us that cutout that I was talking about. Now I could also use silhouette luma and get the same exact effect. You can see there's no change there. And again, that's just because the alpha and the luma in this case are going to have just exactly the same effect because of how the alpha channel works for this particular setup of layers. So I love the way that this works because it is animated, so it's not something we could just quickly mask away. We need it to be able to move with the clouds, and I need it to work where I've just got both of these right next to each other because of the way that these need to stack. I couldn't really use a track mat for this to get the same effect. So this is a much easier way of doing it by using the blend mode to cut it away. So sometimes you're going to find yourself in a situation where a blend mode like silhouette or stencil is going to work better than using a track mat or preserving underlying transparency or a mask. Sometimes it just depends on the situation. Now let's talk about a situation where you may want to use stencil instead of silhouette. I'm going to come back out here to the weather forecast comp. And let's scroll down here to the bottom and go into my cloud footage. So this is just that cloud footage in the background. And I've gone in and blown up one of our little icons that we had, the windy large icon. And I'm just going to put that on top here. So let's say that I want to have the same sort of effect that we had before whenever we were creating that preserve underlying transparency option. Now, in this case, I like that the cloud is on top of this. That's one thing I don't like about that preserve underlying transparency is that this little thing that I want my footage to play inside of has to go on the bottom when you use preserve underlying transparency. So if you already have it stacked on top, using the stencil mode is a great way to quickly achieve the same sort of look where you've just got the footage kind of playing inside of that shape. Now, right now, I've got it set to stencil alpha. And so what that's doing is it's using the alpha of the cloud. But let's see what happens if I change it to stencil luma. I want you to keep an eye on this area here. You can see how that gets just a little bit darker. And the reason for that is because if I am just putting this at a normal blend mode, this is a little bit blue. And this demonstrates an interesting property here. You don't have to use a black and white image as a Luma matte. You can use an image that has color in it. You're just not going to be able to recognize quite as easily what's going to be more of a gray area. So if I had this little wind burst here completely white, then I could use it to its fullest luminance value. But with it being somewhere on its way to black, it's kind of, it's still very light. It's in between, but it's going to affect that luminance just a little bit, so that part is darker. So in this case, if I wanted to just bypass having to change that, I can just use the stencil alpha effect, and it will only look at the outside edge and not be worried about what actual color is used here. So that's a good way to kind of see the difference between the alpha and luma and how those affect our layers when we're using them in this way. So let's go ahead and move on to our last clip in this module where we'll summarize what we've learned so far.